to our very own instructor, Mr. Dexter Mahinay, to my fellow classmates, to my co-reporters, a pleasant day to all of you. Presenting here in front of you to discuss the topic from the book entitled Project Management, the Managerial Process, Chapter 15, which is the International Project. But before anything else, let us all meet the reporters. We have Joshua Quijada, Quiza Salingay, Rica Visande, and yours truly, James Kenneth Ongyot. But before we dig in and begin with the reporting, let us all be warmed up by the topic outline, which will be tackled in a most detailed and comprehensive way. First is the 15.1 outline, which is the environmental factors. This will be discussed by Mr. Joshua Quijada. In here, he will be able to describe the environmental factors that affects project management in different countries. The second outline is the 15.2, which is the project site selection. That will be discussed by Ms. Quiza Salingay. In here, we will be able to identify factors that typically considered in selecting for a foreign location in the project. And third, we have also the 15.3 outline, which is the cross-cultural considerations, a closer look, which will be discussed by Ms. Rica Visande. In here, we will be able to understand cross-cultural issues that impact working on international projects, and we will describe culture shock and strategies for coping with it. And last outline, which is the 15.4, selection and training for international projects, which will be discussed by yours truly. And in this last outline, we will be able to understand how organizations select and prepare to work on international projects. So without further ado, let us all get started. Let us now give the floor to Mr. Joshua Quijada to further discuss the first topic outline, which is the environmental factors.
Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Quijada, and I'm going to report about environmental factors of international project. But before that, let me discuss to you about international projects. According to Russell Lakoff, the principal benefit of living abroad is that it enables us to get glimpses of ourselves as others see us, and to realize that others' views are more than accurate than ours. Progress begins with grasping the truth about ourselves, however unpleasant it may be. So, this chapter targets the international project manager who must resettle in a foreign land to manage a project. The chapter also provides useful information for professionals whose project work requires interacting either directly or virtually with foreign counterparts from around the world. There is no generally accepted framework or roadmap for project managers given international assignments. These project managers typically face a difficult set of problems. For example, absence from home, friends, and sometimes family, personal risk, missed career opportunities, foreign language, culture, and laws. Of course, there are positives. For example, increased income, increased responsibilities, career opportunities, foreign travel, new lifetime friends. How the international project manager adapts and approaches challenges encountered in the host country often determine the success or failure of a project. So, this chapter focuses on four major issues surrounding the management of international projects. First is major environmental factors that impact project selection and implementation are briefly highlighted. Second, an example of how organizations decide where to expand globally is provided. Third, the challenge of working in a strange and foreign culture is addressed. And finally, how companies select and train professionals for international project is discussed. Although by no means comprehensive, this chapter provides an understanding of the major issues and challenges confronting the international project manager. So now, I'm going to report one of the major issues surrounding in management of international project, which is the environmental factors. The major challenge of international project managers face is the reality that what works at home may not work in a foreign environment. Too often, project managers impose practices assumed to be superior from their home country and host country nationals without questioning their applicability to the new environment. Although there are similarities between domestic and international projects, it is a fact that good management practices vary across nations and cultures. It is these differences that can turn an international project into a nightmare.
Go.
When preparing for an international project, a project manager must do due diligence, or in other words, they must research the country or countries that the project might undergo in. There are several host countries factors that can impact or influence how a project is implemented. And those factors are the following: legal or political, security, geography, economic, infrastructure, and culture. Legal or political. Expatriate project managers should operate within the laws and regulation of the host country. Political stability and local laws strongly influence how projects will be implemented. Typically, these laws favor protection of local workers, suppliers, and environment. The constraints imposed by the national and local laws needs to be identified and adhered to, given that the laws that affect business vary widely across countries. Qualified legal assistance is essential. Government corruption is a very real part of international business. In China, various forms of obligatory profit sharing with city officials in the Hainan province have been reported. Employment of relatives, donations, and other favors are an expected cost of doing business in that region. Similarly, according to Bloomberg Businessweek, the main reason Russia has attracted less international investment in Brazil is due to the prospect of being singled out for abuse by government officials who occasionally collaborate with Russian enterprises. Second, security. International acts of terror are a reality today. Crime is another issue. Risk management plays an important role here as well when a project is being implemented in a foreign country. Sometimes, project managers experience ethical issues related to security. Security nationally involves the capacity of a country's military and police forces to prevent and respond to attacks. Here are the frequent ethical issues related to security: terrorism, bribery, corruption. Risk management is always a vital part of project management. Managing projects in a dangerous world is a tough assignment. In addition to the final cost, taking security precaution is important for psychological health of employees who are sent abroad. Effective risk management is critical. For example, Stroll Systems Group, a global leader in recovery planning software and services, includes the following among the questions it uses to evaluate vulnerability to terrorism. Have you included possible terrorist targets in your hazard and vulnerability analysis? Have you conducted a counter-terrorism exercise complete with the law enforcement, fire, medical, and emergency management participation? What should your organization's policy be on negotiating with a person threatening to terrorist act. So, when having international project, kinanglan jud nga mag-do research or mangutana ta kung sa lugar kung it is vulnerable ba sa mga terrorism or other crime kay mo na siya maka-cause or maka-trigger sa nga ma-delay ang usa ka project. Third is geography. One factor that is often underestimated until project personnel actually arrive at a foreign destination is the geography of the country. The planning and implementation of a project must take into account the impact the country's geography will have on the project. For example, a salvage operation of the coast of Greenland can only be scheduled 1 month out of the year because the waterway is frozen over during the remainder of the year. Construction projects in Southeast Asia have to accommodate the monsoon season when rainfall can be as high as 50 inches per month. Geography does not just affect outdoor projects, but it can have an indirect effect on indoor projects. For example, one information system specialist reported that his performance on a project in northern Sweden declined due to sleep deprivation. He attributed his problems to the 20 hours of daylight this part of the world experiences during summer months. Finally, extreme weather conditions can make extraordinary demands on equipment. Projects can grind to a halt because of equipment breakdown under the brunt of the wind and sun. Working under extreme conditions typically requires special equipment which increases the cost and complexity of the project. Sa international project, kinahanglan ta mo consider pod sa weather conditions sa mong lugar nga gaman sa mong project kay for example kung na snow makapalit tag daghang equipment so makadugang og cost sa kanang maong project so kinahanglan nga mo consider ta para maiwasan na to ang delay sa maong project. Fourth is economic. Basic economic factors in foreign countries and regions influence choices of site selection and project success. The gross domestic product of a country suggests the level of development of a country. A faltering economy may indicate fewer sources of capital funding. Changes in protectionist strategies of a host country such as import quotas and tariffs can quickly alter the viability of projects. Factors influencing project choices and operation: balance of payments, taxation, labor laws, safety regulations, and market size. Here the example problem of economic. US contractor agrees to build a customized product for a German client. The product will be built in the United States. The contractor estimates that the project will cost $925,000 and in order to earn a nice profit, prices the project at $1 million. To accommodate the German buyer, the price is converted to euros. Suppose at the time of the contract, the exchange rate is 1.15 per euro and the price specified in the contract is 869,566 euro. 10 months later, the project is completed as expected, with work costing the estimate $925,000 and the customer pays the agreed upon price of 869,566 euro. However, the exchange rate has changed. It is now 1.05 per euro. So here is the solution of the given example. Formula: agreed upon price times new exchange rate equals payment. With this, the payment equates to 869,566 euro times $1.5 is equals to $913,044. So, sa loss formula, payment minus estimated working cost, which is $913,044 minus $925,000. Instead of reaping a nice profit, the contractor suffers a $11,956 loss. So, naay loss tungod kay nausob ang exchange rate sa euro. Usapod sa makapekto sa international project is kaning inflation rate, kaning mausob-usob ang price kay, for example nga karon nga man barato pa nya imong gi-estimate nya mo to imong gipasobraan kay pasobraan, so para makahatag ginansya ka, so pag next month nausob day ang price niya, so mo to hinungdan imbis nga makaginansya ka nalugi na hinon ka, mo tong usa sa makapekto sa international project. Fifth is infrastructure. Infrastructure refers to a country or a community's ability to provide the services required for the project. This pertains to the foreign countries' capacity to supply the services that are necessary for the project. Here are the infrastructure needs for a project. First is communication, next is transportation, power, technology, and education system. Power outages are common in many parts of the world. For example, India's burgeoning economy came to a halt during the 2012 summer when over 670 million people were without power for more than 2 days. If reliable power is not sufficient, other alternatives need to be considered. For example, construction firms often rely on heavy diesel regenerators as backups on their projects. Software projects across borders are common today. However, they depend on reliable telecommunication networks. So if the project depends on a high ratio of vendor suppliers, good roads and other transportation modes such as air and seaports, a good infrastructure will be imperative. So, one US company that was awarded a contract for building a hospital in an African country was awarded the contract without considering the needs and infrastructure of the host nation. The local African officials wanted a low-tech health facility that would respect local customs. Since their relatives generally accompanied patients, they need space as well. Electricity was unreliable, and well-educated doctors were unlikely to want to work outside the city. As a result, the locals wanted a basic care hospital with the bare minimum of technology. On the other hand, the construction company was not going to be accused of building a second-rate facility since it had a preconceived notion of what a hospital should be. It built a modern hospital that could have stood in any US city. The building was completed, but even after several years, it was not used due to insufficient electricity, insufficient air conditioning, and doctors refusing to live in the rural area. Therefore, organizations need to consider the needs of the family of personnel descent overseas. I-consider nila una kung maka-impact ba ang facilities sa excessive hardship for the international families, na by education available sa mga bata. Such factors must be considered because the welfare and comfort of expatriate families play an important role in retaining good project managers and promoting their peak performance. And lastly, we have culture. So, visiting project managers must respect the customs, values, philosophies, and social standards of their host country. Too many projects, audits, and final reports of international projects reflect challenges and problems linked to cultural differences. Global managers recognize that if the customs and social culture dimensions of the host country are not accommodated, projects will rarely succeed. If the customs, values, philosophies, and social standards are not observed by the team, there is a likelihood of failure. Language differences can become a problem. If a project manager and team do not speak the foreign language, it is difficult to communicate and words get lost in translation. Sometimes, project managers will work with people from the foreign country. Language and cultural skills are necessary for success. Culture affects all human resources areas are including recruitment and selection, training and compensation. For most project managers, the biggest difference in managing an international project is operating in a national culture where things are done differently. For example, most developed nations use the same project management techniques. However, activity work is performed can be very different in host country. For example, sa French, nagamit sila backhoe in digging trench, while sa Ethiopia, nagamit sila 20 laborers, which is mas dugay o mas gasto. Another example is sa language, where nay ubang country nga dili familiar sa English language nga maka-cause og language barrier which will result to problems in carrying out tasks. Of all the factors, working within a multicultural environment is most often the greatest challenge for project managers. This is because not only do project managers have to adapt the culture of the host country, but often overseas projects require working with people from other different countries. And that's all my report. Thank you and please stay tuned for the next report. God bless.
Thank you so much for giving us that very informative information, Mr. Quijada. And to keep the presentation rolling, let us go with the second topic, which is the project site selection. Let us all lend our ears to Miss Quiza Salingay.
My topic is all about project site selection. Learning objectives to identify factors that typically are considered in selecting a foreign location for a project. What is project selection? Project selection is the process of evaluating and choosing projects that both align with an organization's objectives and maximize its performance. Site selection is to indicate practice of new facility location for business and government. It involves measuring needs of a new project against the merits of potential location. It is one of the most important decisions required within the development process. Selection must be based not only on current needs but also in projected needs. Selecting the right site for institutional, leisure, entertainment, or recreation project is critical to its success. There are two methods of establishing a site. First, site selection process. The process selects from a list of potential sites that suit best the given use and requirements of the projects. Second, development suitability process. It selects the best possible use and development suited for a given site. One approach for the project manager to digest, clarify, and understand the factors leading to the selection of a specific project is to use the risk factors for different project sites. There are a large number of factors that are important consideration to site selection. Some are population of the region, climate, accessibility, visibility, traffic count, physical barriers, character of surrounding properties and community, site size and shape, topography, infrastructure improvements, drainage, site orientation, environmental requirements, computation, zoning, and the last one is cost and time frame. Site selection factors criteria based on other building types. First, accessibility. It should be easily accessible by transportation and pedestrians, and other infrastructure will help to ease things for the proposed building occupants. Besides being easy to access, consider how accessible other places from you. Second, image or visual quality. Quality of the existing neighborhood surrounding the project needs to complement rather than distract from it. It should be located in an area with a strong positive identity and image, and should also be compatible with surrounding land uses, both existing and proposed. Visibility. A prominent location is required to attract a large number of people to the proposed building. High visibility along a major street with easy accessibility is ideal. If the site involves other building, the building project should be able to be oriented in the portion of the site with highest visibility. Demographic patterns. Sites should be located where people can easily reach it and conduct other activities during the same trip. Place where people naturally converge, and it should be where the largest percentage of all people to be served will have access frequently in the normal pursuit of their activities. Site capacity. The site should be large enough to provide sufficient area required for the parking for users, future expansion, suitable landscaping, and zoning requirements. Example: library, 4 times larger than the building. Neighborhood comparability. Process to include the provision of notice to potentially affected neighbors and the opportunity to address concerns. Utilities availability. It is necessary for the construction of the improvements will be available prior to the commencement of construction. To avoid extra costs, the presence of electrical, water, gas, sewer, and other services should be in place now, or by the time construction is scheduled to start. Physiography. An area is the outcome of structure process of the stage of development. Suitability of the soil, the topography of the site, and orientation, soil, water are considered. And the last one is site-related cost. The cost of the land is important as well as local building costs and living conditions. It should be compared on the basis of the following factors: demolition cost of any existing facilities on the site, relocation cost of any existing business or residence currently on the site, cost of providing sufficient utility service to the site. In Figure 15.2 presents a truncated matrix for project site selection of the construction of a factory in Singapore, India, and Ireland. In this example, political stability, worker skill and supply, culture compatibility, infrastructure government support, and product to market advantage were the major assessment factors. In this project, Ireland was the choice. Clearly, Singapore and Ireland were very close in terms of infrastructure and several other factors. In Figure 15.3 is the breakdown of the infrastructure evaluation factor. In this example, transportation, educated workforce, utilities, telecommunication, and vendor suppliers are considered important to evaluating infrastructure of each site. The scores given in this figure used to assign values to the infrastructure in this assessment matrix. Given the macroeconomic factors, it is imperative the project manager quickly becomes sensitized to the foreign cultural factors that can spell project success or failure.
And indeed, very detailed presentation by Ms. Quiza Salingay. Moving on to the third topic to be presented by Ms. Rica Visande with the topic Cross-Culture Considerations, a Closer Look. Let us all give the floor to her.
15.3 Cross-Cultural Considerations, a Closer Look. So, the concept of culture was introduced in Chapter 3 as referring to the unique personality of a particular firm. So, more specifically, culture was defined as a system of shared norms, beliefs, values, and customs that bind people together, creating shared meaning and a unique identity. It is a concept created for descriptive purposes and depends on the group that is the focus of attention. For example, within a global context, culture can refer to a certain regions, to specific nations, or to certain ethnic or religious groups. We freely recognize that many cultural characteristics are borderless and that there is a considerable variation within any one country. Still, national cultures will provide a useful anchor for understanding different habits, customs, and values around the world.
Next is the adjustments. So, adjustments are typically in working abroad, adjustments are expected. Like Americans, two of the biggest adjustments are adapting to the general pace of life and the punctuality of people. So, what can be said to prepare people to work on international projects? The world is too diverse to do justice in one chapter to all the cultural variations managers are likely to encounter when working on international projects. Instead, a sample of some of these differences will be highlighted by discussing working on projects including Mexico, France, Saudi Arabia, China, and the United States. Working in Mexico. Conversely, Mexico developed historically in an environment where the only people to trust were family and close friends, and by extension, people who were known to those whom you knew well. So, as a consequence, personal relationships dominate all aspects of Mexican business. The significance of personal relationship has created a compadre system in which Mexicans are obligated to give preference to relatives and friends when hiring, contracting, procuring, and sharing business opportunities. Mexicans tend to perceive Americans as being cold. Because family is all important to Mexicans, a good way for developing a personal relationship is exchanging information about each other's family. Finally, as in many other cultures, Mexicans are taught taking action without knowing what is expected or wanted can have dangerous consequences. Mexicans tend to be more cautious and want to spend more time discussing risk and potential problems that Americans might dismiss as improbable or irrelevant. So, other useful guidelines for working with Mexicans on projects include the following. First, Americans tend to be impersonal and practical in making arguments. So, Mexican can be very, very passionate and emotional when arguing. They enjoy a lively debate. Second, Mexicans tend to see meetings as the place where persons with authority ratify what has been decided during informal private discussions. Third, while Mexicans can be emotional, they tend to shy away from any sort of direct confrontation or criticism. A long silence often indicates displeasure or disagreement. Fourth, speech in Mexico is often indirect. People rarely say no directly but are more likely to respond by saying maybe or quizas. or by saying I will think about it, or changing the subject. Yes or see is more likely to mean I understand you than yes. And fifth, titles are extremely important in Mexico and are always used when a person is introducing him or herself or being introduced. Pay as much attention to remembering a person's title or as to remembering his or her name. Next is working in France. Some Americans consider the French the most difficult to work with among Europeans. This feeling probably stems from a reflection of the French culture, which is quite different from that in the United States. So in France, one social class is very important. Social interactions are constrained by class standing, and during their lifetimes, most French people do not encounter much changing in social status. The French tend to admire or be fascinated with people who disagree with them. The French are accustomed to conflict and during negotiations accept the fact that some positions are reconcilable and must be accepted as such. Also, the French often determine a person's trustworthiness based on their first-hand personal evaluation of the individual's characters. The French are also often accused of lacking an intense work ethics. And mostly, French organizations tend to be highly centralized with rigid structures. As a result, it usually takes longer to carry out decisions. So, there are some of the cautions to remember with the French, including the following.
First, the French value punctuality. So, importante sa mga French ang time when naa sila meeting and sa social occasions. Second, great importance is placed on neatness and taste. So, if mag-interact kag mga business people nga mga French, you need to pay attention to your own professional appearance and you need to appear cultured and sophisticated. Third, the French can be very difficult to negotiate with because they ignore facts no matter how convincing they may be, and also they are quite secretive about their position, so it is difficult to obtain information from them even in support for their position. So in working with French, you need to have a long patience in negotiating with them. Fourth, French managers tend to see their work as an intellectual exercise. They do not share the Americans' view of management as an interpersonally demanding exercise where plans have to be constantly solved upward and downward using personal skills. Fifth, the French generally consider managers to be experts. They expect managers to give precise answers to work-related questions to preserve their reputation, where some French managers ask if they know the answers to questions even when they don't.
Next is working in Saudi Arabia. Project management has a long tradition in Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries. A number of cultural differences can be cited for this difficulty. One is the Arabian view of time. In Saudi Arabia, a favorite expression is Bokra Insha Allah, which means tomorrow if God's will, an expression that reflects the Saudis' approach to time. As a result, when Saudis commit themselves to a date in the future and fail to show up, there is no guilt or concern on their part because they have no control over time in the first place. An associated cultural belief is that the destiny depends more on the will of a supreme being than on the behavior of individuals. So a higher power dictates the outcome of important events. So individual actions is a little consequence. As a result, progress or the lack of progress on a project is considered more a question of fate than effort. Another important cultural contrast, Saudis often act on the basis of emotion. So during negotiations, it is important not only to share the facts but also to make emotional appeals that demonstrate your suggestion is the right thing to do. Saudis also make use of elaborate and ritualized forms of greetings and leave-taking. So a business person may wait for the task with assigned greeting time before admitted to a Saudi Arabia. So one there, the individual may find a host of others present. One-on-one meetings are rare. Next is Saudis attach a great deal of importance to status and rank. When meeting with them, defer to the senior person. It is also important to never criticize or berate anyone publicly. This causes the individual to lose face. The same is true for the person who made these comments. Mutual respect is expected at all times. Other useful guidelines for working in Arab culture such as Saudi Arabia is included in the following. First, it is important never to display feelings of superiority because this makes the other party feel inferior. So no matter how well someone does something, the individual should let the action speak for itself and not brag or draw attention to himself. Second, a lot of what gets done is a result of going through administrative channels in the country. It is often difficult to sidestep a lot of this red tape and effort to do so can be regarded as disrespect for legal and governmental institutions. Third, connections are extremely important in conducting the business. More important, people get fast service from less important people. Close relatives take absolute priority, non-relatives are keep waiting. Fourth, patience is critical to the success of business negotiations. So time for deliberation should be built into all negotiations to prevent a person from giving away too much in an effort to reach a quick settlement. And fifth, important decisions are usually made in person and not by the correspondence or telephones. While Saudis seek counsel from many people, the ultimate power to make a decision rests with the person at the top, and this individual relies heavily on the personal impressions, trust, and rapport. Next is working in China. So, in recent years, the People's Republic of China, or China for short, has moved away from isolation to encourage more business with the rest of the world. Many Western firms have found working on projects in China to be a long, grueling process that often results in failure. One of the primary reasons for problems is the failure to appreciate Chinese culture. So, Chinese society, like Japan and Korea, is influenced by the teachings of Confucius. In Confucian societies, the primary deterrent against improper or illegal behavior is shame or loss of face. Face is more than simply reputation. There is a Chinese saying that face is like the bark of a tree. Without its bark, the tree dies. Loss of face not only brings shame to individuals but also to the family members. In China, whom you know is more important than what you know. The term guangxi refers to personal connections with appropriate authorities or individuals. China observers argue that guangxi is critical for working with the Chinese. Chinese are raised to distrust strangers, especially foreigners. Trust is transmitted via guangxi. Many believe that the quickest way to build guangxi relationship is through tendering favors, gift-giving, entertainment at lavish banquet, questionable payments, and overseas trips are common. So in dealing with the Chinese, you must realize that they are a collective society in which people pride themselves on being a member of the group. For this reason, you should never single out as Chinese for specific praise because this is likely to embarrass the individual in front of his peers. At the same time, you should avoid the use of he because it conveys that the speaker is drawing attention to himself or herself. Other cautions include the following. First, once the Chinese decide who and what is best, they tend to stick to their decision. So while they may be slow in formulating a plan, once they get started, they make good progress. Second, reciprocity is important in negotiations. So if Chinese give concessions, they expect some in return. Third, the Chinese tend to be less animated than Americans. They avoid open displays of affection and physical contact. Fourth, the Chinese place less value on the significance of time and often get Americans to concede concessions by stalling. Fifth, in Confucian society, those in position of power and authority are obligated to assist the disadvantages. In return, they gain praise and a good reputation.
Next is working in the United States. So in the world of international project, professionals from other countries will come to the United States to manage projects. Immigration has made the United States a melting pot of diverse cultures. Mainstream, Americans are motivated by achievement and accomplishment. Their identity and, to a certain extent, their self-worth are measured by what they have achieved. Americans tend to idolize the self-made person who rises from poverty and adversity to become a rich and successful. So, most Americans have a strong belief that they can influence and create their future, that with hard work and initiative, they can achieve whatever they set out to do. Americans think they can accomplish just about anything, given time, money, and technology. Americans fought a revolution and subsequent wars to preserve their concept of democracy, so they resent too much control or interference, especially by governments, while more an ideal than practice. There is a deep-rooted belief in American management philosophy that those people who will be affected by decisions should be involved in making decisions. Americans are very time-conscious and efficient. They are expected meetings to start on time. And Americans in play or business generally are quite competitive, reflecting their desire to achieve and succeed. Other guidelines and cautions for working with Americans on projects include the following. First, more than half of U.S. women are work outside the home. Females have considerable opportunity for personal and professional growth guaranteed by law. It is not uncommon to find women in key project positions. Second, in the United States, gifts are rarely brought by visitors in a business situation. And third, Americans tend to be quite friendly and open when first meeting someone. Foreigners often mistake the strong "come on" for the beginning of a strong reciprocal friendship. Fourth, although in comparison to the rest of the world, Americans tend to be informal in greetings and dress. They are non-contact culture. They avoid embracing in public usually, and Americans maintain certain physical or psychological distance with others, about 2 feet in conversations. And fifth is American decision-making is results-oriented. Decisions tend to be based on facts and expected outcomes, not social impact. In summary comments about working in different cultures, these briefings underscore the complex of working on international projects. So, they act as a translators and they use their social connection to expedite transactions and protect the project against undue interference. The international briefing also highlights the importance of project managers doing their homework and becoming familiar with the customs and habits of the host country they are going to be working in. So, as far as possible, the project should be managed in such a way that local country norms and customs are honored.
Next is culture shock. Culture shock is a natural psychological disorientation that most people suffer when they move into a culture different from their own. So the culture shock cycle has 4 stages. First is the honeymoon. You start your overseas assignment with a sense of excitement. Second, irritability and hostility. Your initial enthusiasm is exhausted and you begin to notice that the differences are greater than you first imagined. You become frustrated by your inability to get things done as you are accustomed to. Third is the gradual adjustment. You begin to overcome your sense of isolation and figure out how to get things done in the new culture. You acquire a new perspective of what is possible and regain confidence in your ability to work in the culture. And fourth, adaptation. You recover from your sense of psychological disorientation and begin to function and communicate in the new culture. Culture shock is not a disease but a natural response to immersing yourself into a new environment. It is the result from a breakdown in your selective perception and effective interpretation system. In coping with the cultural shock, there are a wide range of stress management techniques for coping with culture shock. One method does not necessarily work any better than other. Success depends on the particular individual and situation involved. Some people engage in regular physical exercise programs, some practice meditation and relaxation exercises, and others find it healthy to keep a journal. So many effective international managers create stability zones. They spend most of this time immersed in the foreign culture but then briefly retreat into an environment, a stability zone that closely recreates home.
With great presentation, a great understanding indeed. Thank you so much, Miss Visande. And now, we will be discussing very carefully the topic number 4, which is the selection and training for international projects. By this topic, as per mentioned a while ago, this topic aims to let us understand how organizations select and prepare people to work on international projects. And without further ado, let us all keep the topic rolling. So as when professionals are selected for overseas projects and they do not work out, the overall costs can be staggering. So when we say staggering, it is the somewhat astonishing, or in this context, overwhelming in a negative way. So not only does the project experience a serious setback, but the reputation of the firm is damaged in the region. This is why many firms have developed formal screening procedures to help ensure the careful selection of personnel for international projects. In here, we can say that choosing someone can be the representative of the organization or the business is very crucial and vital. Choosing a person takes a lot of lists to be considered. Organizations examine a number of characteristics to determine whether an individual is suitable for overseas work. They may look for work experience with cultures other than one's own, previous overseas travel, good physical and emotional health, a knowledge of a host nation's language, and even the recent immigration background or heritage. Prospective candidates and their family members are often interviewed by trained psychologists who assess their ability to adopt and function in the new culture. So in here, it is very obvious that family has a great impact of an individual to work overseas since they are the one who really know that person very well. they could be also possible to move together with that someone in accordance to the company or whatever the company decides. While there is a growing appreciation for screening people for foreign assignments, the number one reason for selection is that the personnel assigned are the best people available for their technical challenges of the project. This is by Mendenhall et al. 1987. Technical know-how takes precedence over cross-cultural sensitivity or experience. So when we say precedence, it is the condition of being considered more important than someone or something else. So it is prioritizing a lot higher than a thing or someone. So if we are weighing these both, it was written that technical known is much more prioritized. As a consequences, training is critical to fill in the cultural gaps and prepare individuals to work in a foreign land. Training varies widely depending on the individual, the company, the nature of the project, and cultures to work with. So in here we have project professionals assigned to foreign countries should have a minimal understanding of the following areas. First is the religion. In global business, religion is a key factor in global team works together, schedule meetings, and more. Worldwide, religion is one of the key factors in workplace cultural diversity. Employees want religious beliefs and practices to be accommodated, including time during the workday for the rituals and time off from work for observances. So in business, it is believed that failing to recognize different religions and respecting the needs of individual employees can lead to team conflict, scheduling problems, and costly employee turnover. To help people from different cultures work together in harmony, it is essential for the people to be aware of the different religions and key events. The second one is the dress code. So dress code is a dress code that indicates the most appropriate way to dress on a certain occasion, be it on social events, work environments, or even to go to school or college. The goal is to standardize the look, making all people conform. It can be considered a facilitator when choosing the most suitable clothes for each situation. However, the lack of a dress code may work well for some companies, but a complete disaster for others. Therefore, it is necessary to be careful and to know the culture of each company well. And we are not saying that you should ignore your style and follow what society says. Dress code does not necessarily mean extremely rigid and formal attire. So if you are familiar with Nana Silahiro, TikTok star, that one that has Bebu, she once represented the Philippines in TikTok awards in Indonesia, and yet she dressed very sexy. And maybe that dress is vulgar to their view of that place. So at the end, she was advised to wear scarf just to make her appearance more of a formal, since it will be aired on the national television of that place. So yeah, we really should be aware and should have advanced research to where place will be assigned for international projects. Moving forward with the third one, the education system. Even when systems create conditions coherent for learning, ultimately learning outcomes depend on what happens in daily interactions. So for every organization that needs particular capabilities for delivery of student learning, there has to be a set of strategies and tactics for expanding those capabilities. Through this engagement, this seeks to understand how organizations within systems are able to nominate, to evaluate, and to adopt innovation. And also, this could be a venue to build the organizational capability to do each of these things, and how these systems create the condition in which organizations are authorized to do these activities, and that good fit practice diffuse across organization within the system. In layman's term, we should be able to determine where scope or field of education they are giving a lot of importance, to comprehend if we lack, and to always be that person that is teachable. Fourth in the line is the holidays, national and religious. Companies conducting business across borders should have a solid understanding of each market's statutory requirements and observance dates regarding holidays, as well as the significance and customs surrounding each holidays, which is said by Samantha Polivina. The public holidays you choose to recognize, how you recognize them, and the way you communicate your decision can affect key factors like employee engagement, inclusion, and sense of belongingness. That said, many organizations offered paid time off for holidays that align with the local country's federal holiday calendar, which rarely has been designed with inclusion in mind. And now we are down to the fifth one, which is the daily eating patterns. Few things are simple about international relations. The world's most studied state-to-state interaction are the result of decades, if not centuries, of history that labels. But international policy analyst Chris Fair sees a simpler way to understand why some countries are the way they are: the food they eat. When you go to Netherlands, you eat Indonesian food. When you go to France, you're eating the stuff from Northern Africa. In England, it's curry. In Japan, it's Korean. And in the US, it's Mexican. So when you go to these countries and see what the fast food or popular choice it is usually represents a deeper history. We should be always culture sensitive to promote respect to that place and the people around that. There were some places that won't eat meat, so the availability of pigs and meat as expected is too low or zero. So in this case, your favorite steaks may be passed for a couple of months or years in accordance to the contract. And now we have the family life. Organizations have a duty of care to their assignees, but thus these extend to the families of assignees too. After all, relocation affects not only the assignee but the entire family, as what I have said earlier. When looking at the expatriate success factors, we cannot underestimate the importance of family support and involvement in the assignment project. Research shows a clear correlation between family support and a successful international assignment. Despite this, many organizations still overlook the importance of providing the assignee and their family with a support structure that can ease the adaptation process in the new country. This is where global mobility professionals can play a fundamental role in helping both the assignee and their family to adapt as quickly as possible. A bad start can set the tone for the rest of the assignment. The rules of the human community presuppose the cultivation of universal forms of behavior that facilitate the communication of people, demonstrating maximum peace, respect for each other. To these norms acquires a special meaning in international communications. Since every state is also individual, adherence in its own historical development, social and economic order, and national and cultural traditions. The concepts of etiquette and protocols are largely similar and interrelated. Therefore, protocol and etiquette is a better considered not in isolation but in a complex. So when we say business protocols, the basis and essence of the protocol is an expression of deep respect for the high guest, the country, and the people that he represents. Although, of course, each country's protocol has its own nuances, knowledge of which facilitates international and foreign economic contacts. So, when we say social etiquette, on the other hand, the rules of etiquette are basically international, as most of them are observed in all countries of the world. Simultaneously, the etiquette of each country inherits customs and conventions from ancient antiquity to our days and has rather significant features, which is due to historical, national, religious, and other traditions. So, etiquette and protocol are one of the main components of forming the image of any business person, civil servant, organization, and play a very important role in the successful conduct of business, including international. And now, we are down to the last one, which is the equal opportunity. The importance of equal opportunity in the workplace is very vital. An equal and inclusive workplace culture allows all people to thrive at work regardless of their background, identity, or circumstances. Equal opportunity law aims to promote everyone's right to equal opportunities, eliminate as far as possible discrimination and sexual harassment, and provide redress for people whose rights has been breached. So many people believe that equal opportunity requires that advantaged position be subject to open competition. So this is viewed and sometimes captured by the slogan careers open to the talents. The idea there is that jobs and limited educational places should be open to all and that selection procedures for them should be designed to identify the best qualified candidates. But even if it is a necessary condition of equal opportunity, it cannot be a sufficient condition. If it were, equal opportunity would permit differences in people's social circumstances, such as the economic class, family, or culture into which they were born, to have too deep an impact on their prospects. On the screen is an illustrative sample of companies that contains the difference between short-term training developed by Underwriter Laboratories Incorporation, and we have also here an extensive type of training by Peace Corps and their volunteers. So the scenario goes this way. It was illustrated the features of short-term training program that is developed by Underwriter Laboratories Incorporation to train staff who travel to Japan to work with clients on the projects. So the program is designed around a series of mini lectures that cover topics ranging from how to handle the introductions to the proper way of exchange gifts to the correct way of interpreting Japanese social and business behavior. So the 2-day program consists of lectures, case studies, role plays, language practice, and a short test on cultural terminology. It concludes with a 90-minute question and answer period, and at the end of the program, participants have a fundamental understanding on how to communicate with the Japanese. So more importantly, they know the types of information they lack and how to go about learning more to become effective and intercultural communicators. So it was depicted the number of days they have trained that would affect the information they are gaining. So on the other hand, other training programs are more extensive. For example, the Peace Corps volunteers, as I have mentioned a while ago, they have undergo an intense 2 to 4 month training program in their country of service. So the training includes classes of the history and traditions of the country, intensive language instruction, and cross-cultural training, as well as homestays with local families. So many companies outsource training in one of the many firms specializing the overseas and intercultural training. We can see that the length of training or program is a lot longer since they have proposed on gaining more information and more knowledge in a more extensive and more detailed way. To explain very carefully on how this approaches its length of training and the specific information that will be acquired, figure 15.7 attempts to link the length and type of training with the cultural fluency required to successfully complete the project. 3 different learning approaches are highlighted. This is in accordance with Mendenhall et al. 1987. First is the information giving approach. This is the learning of information or skills from a lecture type orientation. So at this type of approach, we are able to listen or to dwell with the information that we are getting. We are also penetrating all of the possible ideas that this type of approach could offer. So listed examples here are the area briefings, cultural briefings, films, books, use of interpreters, and survival level language training. So example here is the orientation in the beginning of the academic year. So we have listened, we are able to penetrate things, to remember what to do, what to not to do, and so on. So now we are down to the second one, which is the affective approach. So it tackles the learning of information or skills that raise the affective responses on the part of the trainee and result in cultural insights. At this type of approach, it is more likely the small hands-on activities and getting of ideas. So we experience many activities hands-on and we learn from that. So this approach consists of culture assimilator training, role-playing, cases, culture shock, stress reduction training, and moderate language training. So we could also picture out here is our daily approach to the school. So we are able to learn that aims to affect our daily basis. We are subject for molding into something that would benefit us all. And now we are down to the third and last approach, which is the behavioral or experiential approach, variant of the affective approach technique that provides the trainee with realistic simulation or scenario. So at this kind of approach, we are able to be more specific and be more hands-on literally and be more hands-on on study. So we could say that the amount of preparation and after doing a stuff will really take time. So we have concluded of these examples like the assessment center, field experiences, simulations, and extensive language training. So we could see this as our on-the-job training, the OJT training. We are able to experience on hand all of the operation that would bring us learnings and experiences. According to this framework, the length and level of training would depend on the degree of cultural fluency required to be successful. In general, the longer the person is expected to work in the foreign country, the more intensive the training should be. Length of stay should not be the only consideration. High levels of cultural fluency and therefore more extensive training may be required to perform short-term intense projects. In addition, location is important. For example, when in Russia, you should keep a straight face because smiling is deemed an intimate gesture. According to the research, smiling for no obvious reason makes Russians suspect you're being false. So another thing is in Japan, exposing one teeth while laughing is considered impolite, owing to a Buddhist belief that exposing one's bone is a filthy act. You can of course laugh and yawn while dining at your newly discovered sushi restaurant. Just don't forget to cover your mouth with your hands. So for those who are very loud up in laughing, I know some of you, joke aside. So we should at least practice this culture of the host country if we want to go to Japan. And now we are down to the summary. So the number of international projects continues to increase and nothing on the horizon suggests things will change in the new millennium. More and more project managers will be needed to implement international projects. There are few guidelines for the fledgling international project manager. Preparing for international projects can be enhanced through training. As a general background, potential international project managers can benefit from a basic international business course that sensitizes them to the forces of change in the global economy and to the cultural differences. Learning a foreign language is also strongly recommended. Further training specific to the host country is a very useful pre-project endeavor. The length and type of training usually depend on the duration of the project manager's assignment. So, we suggest to review the figure 15.7. Still, self-learning, on-the-job training, and experience are the best teachers for international project managers. Preparing for a specific international project requires serious pre-project homework, understanding the motivation of the firm in selecting the project, and its site provides important insights. What basic political, geographic, economic, and infrastructure factors were key considerations, how they will impact the implementation of their project. Finally, preparation in understanding the cultural differences of the host country go a long way toward making positive first impressions with the nationals in managing the project. International projects have a distinct personalities. All people are not the same. Differences within and among countries and cultures are numerous and complex. Project managers need to accept these differences and treat them as real or live with the consequences. What works at home may not work in the foreign country. Americans are regarded as friendly by our neighbors in the global village, but Americans are also noted to be insensitive to differences in local cultures and customs and awkward in our use of language other than English. That ends our presentation. This is James Kenneth V. Ongyot saying although most attention in foreign project is focused on technical efforts and their cost, the project must be carried out within the environment of the country's social customs, work practices, government controls, and religious beliefs. In most cultures, sincerity and flexibility will pay off. This is Group 2 saying thank you so much for listening and now signing off.